I just wanted to take a minute and talk to some people about these Dillon presses. Dillon, this is a basic loader 550, wonderful press. Love it, and I think it's designed really well, works great. But online in some forums we've actually been having some discussion, quite heated in some cases, about something called primer tube detonation, where when you've got the automatic priming system on here, you could potentially on a priming stroke set off a primer that would then explode and cause a chain reaction in your primer tube here to explode and then cause a chain reaction, basically sending all 100 pieces of your primers in there as shrapnel, potentially anywhere, causing some tremendous damage. I just couldn't quite wrap my brain around how you get an explosion or detonation here, or potentially even underneath here, and exert enough force to actually set off a live primer. I know some of them are a little more sensitive than others, but still, it takes quite a bit of force, and not just force, but sharp force. And so I did a little experimentation on my model, and I think I've got a plausible explanation. I think you can certainly have an on-press detonation if your primer's crooked, or if you're crimping into a military pocket and things just don't happen right. I think that's very, very plausible. That's certainly not going to cause a primer tube detonation. With the distance here, that gives you a pretty measurable safety margin, and so I think we've got something else that's happening. And doing a little bit of experimentation on my machine, I think I've found a plausible explanation. If during the reloading process, as you're working the press back and forth, I have noticed on multiple occasions for myself loose primers sitting on the priming arm. And so if you actually get a loose primer that's sitting here on the priming arm, then potentially as your press comes back down and then you push forward on the handle to prime it, you actually can exert a tremendous amount of force downward that would certainly be a sufficient amount to detonate a live primer. So what I did is actually was able to take a dead primer. Didn't want to experiment with the real thing, but I took a dead primer and was actually able to just decimate it and completely crush it, easily exerting enough effort to set it off. And from that angle on the priming arm, I think it would be completely plausible to have that cause a primer tube detonation. And we've seen numerous times where primer tubes have just been blown up and stuck in the ceiling and all types of things. So I think it's probably a pretty rare event, but nonetheless, I think it's at least in my mind very, very plausible now. So the solution to that would be one of two steps. Number one would be, of course, to watch for loose primers sitting on the primer arm. I've seen it multiple times, and it certainly is something to look out for. And number two could possibly be a little bit of a design change by Dillon, where if they took and actually radiused this primer arm a little bit. It sounds simple, probably a little more complicated than producing a square primer arm, but certainly that would have a lot less tendency for primers to sit on it, and they'd actually fall off. Again, these are all my theories. I think be careful, and safety is always number one, but watch out for loose primers sitting on the primer arm, and wear your safety glasses. Good luck.